The internet is full of creepy stories, but some of the scariest ones come straight from the people who experience them. Today, we're diving into the depths of Reddit to bring you some of the most chilling, unexplainable, and downright terrifying stories we could find.
So sit back, listen closely, and try not to get too paranoid. This is the Paranoia Pair. I got a frog in my throat. So most of my stories come from the are no sleep,
Mhm.
which I know is just made up stuff. But I don't care because it was creepy. I got a few of my stories. This was one of them off a comment thread of the scariest stories that people have found on Reddit. So my first story is from the are no sleep. It's titled, My Wife Has Been Peeking at Me from Around the Corners and Behind Furniture. It's gone from weird to terrifying. It's kind of long, but it's creepy. Um, so my wife Lynn and I have been together for 6 years and married for 11 months. Our entire history together has been very normal, and never once have I ever noticed any weird behaviors or red flags. I can't stress enough how out of character this whole thing is for her. Lynn is very kind, intelligent, and thoughtful. She's always been the no nonsense type of person. Being childish or trying to scare me is not something she'd normally do. She doesn't even like watching horror movies. When we first started dating, she agreed to watch The Shining with me because she knew how much I loved horror. She was so scared that she didn't even make it halfway through the movie before we had to turn it off. She isn't in anything creepy and has never been into pranks. It's just not her cup of tea, and that's fine. But that's what's so strange about all of this. It's just so unlike her. I should also add that she's never had any mental health issues, and as far as I'm aware, it doesn't run in her family. I know some people are able to hide their mental health problems, but in the 6 years we've been together, I think I'd seen some sort of sign. 2 months ago, I was in the kitchen making myself some coffee before work. I was running a bit late that morning and knew I wouldn't be able to make it to Dunkin' Donuts for my usual morning fix. I took a sip of my coffee as I hurried down the hall towards the front door when I happened to notice Lynn peeking at me from around the corner ahead of me. I could only see her eyes and a strand of her long dark hair hanging against the wall. The rest of her body was concealed behind the corner. I nearly spit my coffee when I saw her. I did burn the shit out of my lips. Geez, Lynn, I said, wiping a few drops of coffee from my pants. You scared the shit out of me. She immediately popped out of view like a little kid that had been caught. I heard her scurry towards off to the living room, and by that time I got to the front door, she was out of sight. It was really weird and just totally out of her character for her, like I said, but I also found it kind of funny that she was being more playful and a little less serious. I shouted that I loved her and called her a weirdo. As I shut the door behind me, I heard her laughing. Her behavior was a bit odd, but it certainly wasn't something to call a priest over. I forgot about it by lunch, and by the time I got home, she was her normal self. I didn't bring it up, and neither did she, and life went on. The next incident happened 3 days later. It was around 2 a.m. I had woken up to get a drink. I was standing at the kitchen island, jug of OJ in hand, when I felt a strong sense that I was being watched. For whatever reason, I looked down at the floor and saw my wife's smiling face staring back at me. She was peeking at me from the other side of the island, staring up at me with wide, unblinking eyes and grinning like the Cheshire cat. I screamed, I'll admit it, not out of irritation but fear. For some reason, at that moment, I was scared. At the sound of my scream, Lynn scuttled backwards out of my view, her hands and feet smacking the tile floor as she hurried out of the kitchen on all fours. I didn't run after her or even yell at her. I just stood there frozen in shock, wondering what the fuck had possessed her to do that. It took me a little while longer than I'd like to admit to go back upstairs, but I eventually did. When I got to her bedroom, Lynn was lying on her side asleep, or at least pretending to be. I stood there for a while, watching her breathe to be sure she was really asleep. I had the feeling she might jump out at me the moment I got into bed, but she didn't. I climbed into bed and she didn't even move. Her breathing was soft and deep, and I was starting to wonder if I dreamt the whole thing. The next morning, I waited for her to come down for coffee, and after handing her a mug and kissing her cheek, I decided to ask her about it. What was that about last night? I asked, keeping my tone light so I didn't offend or embarrass her. She frowned over her cup of coffee, shaking her head like she had no clue what I was referring to. You were peeking at me again from over there, I said, pointing to the spot on the floor by the kitchen island. She followed my gaze, and when she looked back at me, she burst out laughing. She laughed so hard that I couldn't help but join her. You creep me the fuck out sometimes, you know that? I said. She giggled and set her cup on the counter and wrapped her arms around my neck. You creep me out all the time, so I guess we're even, she teased. We said our goodbyes and left for work. As I drove, I kept thinking about how creepy it had been seeing her grinning at me from behind the island like that. The sounds her hands made on the floor as she crawled away, I told myself she was just trying to be silly, just trying to join me in my love of all things horror. It's not like I was afraid of her, but it didn't sit right with me. I started seeing her peeking at me more and more. Sometimes she'd be peeking out from behind the couch or living room curtains. Once she even managed to get inside her grandmother's old trunk that sits at the foot of our bed. I might not have even known she was there had the old trunk's hinges not given her away. She had the lid propped open just enough that only half of her face peeked through. She'd been grinning like an excited toddler. It was unnerving. I didn't even know what to say. All I could do was stare. When I finally found my voice, I asked her why on earth she was doing this. She didn't answer, but she had slowly closed the lid, shutting herself inside the trunk. I just walked away, feeling disturbed. I didn't understand why she was doing it, but it clearly made her happy. I hoped she would tire of the game quickly. Lynn didn't peek at me for the next 2 weeks. I started to think she was done with her weird prank, and I was relieved. We were watching a show on Netflix one night, and I jokingly said that I hadn't seen her peeking at me lately and that she must have given up on her spy game. She looked at me with a small smile and said, "Maybe I've just gotten better at it." I didn't say anything, but I wondered whether or not she was joking. For the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about what she said. Was she still peeking at me when I wasn't looking and I just hadn't noticed? And if so, what the hell was she getting out of this? I started to feel paranoid, constantly checking whether she was watching from around the corner or behind a door. I was jumpy. Whenever I was home and she wasn't in full view of me, I felt stupid and a little crazy. But after a few weeks without another incident, I began to relax. I stopped checking behind furniture and walls and told myself it was just a bad memory. Then a few days ago, things got much worse. Lynn left to go to a friend's, and I lounged on the couch and played a couple of games on my laptop. Around 9 p.m., I hopped in the shower, and as I was washing soap from my hair, I felt that awful feeling that I was being watched. Slowly, I opened my eyes and almost had a fucking heart attack. Lynn was peeking from behind the shower curtain, her entire head stretched into the shower, leaving just her body outside. Her long dark hair hung against the curtain, the ends dripping with water. Her mouth hung open in a terrible grin, eyes wide and red as if she hadn't blinked in a while. I screamed and jumped back against the wall. She didn't move, nor did her smile waver. Her makeup ran down her cheeks in two black streaks. She looked giddy, completely deranged. I was fucking terrified. Li-
I It's the worst feeling in the world. Every time I'm in the shower, I'm like,
I always imagine The Grudge.
"Yes."
That has been like, and like on the ceiling or something.
Yeah, or, like, peeking over the rod. I'm just, like,
Yes.
on edge the whole time.
I don't know how you can be calm. A second later, the bathroom door slammed shut, hard enough to rattle the mirror. I screamed again and jumped out of the shower to lock the door. I stayed inside of the bathroom for over an hour. Maybe I overreacted to some of you, but joke or not, I wasn't going to put up with the crazy shit anymore. That's what I kept telling myself as I paced in the bathroom, stopping to listen at the door every few minutes. Suddenly, I heard a muffled sound and I pressed my ear against the bathroom door, straining to listen. I couldn't hear anything, but I envisioned Lynn standing on the other side of the door, giggling at her joke. I felt a surge of anger. I was beyond pissed at being made to feel scared in my own house and made to hide in the bathroom for over an hour. All for what? Some joke? If it was a joke, it was an awful one. What the fuck, Lynn? I snapped. This shit is getting really fucking annoying. I waited for her to apologize or to call me a jerk, but instead I heard a faint moan. So quiet I wondered if I had heard it at all, and then complete silence. Lynn? I called out, not able to even hide the shakiness of my voice. I got no response, just my own heavy breathing. I swear to God, just fucking stop it, I yelled, pounding my fist on the door. I waited for her to cuss me out, something I would expect from me talking to her like that. I never screamed at her before. But there was nothing, just the occasional drip from the shower head. I won't deny that I was scared, too afraid to open the damn door and face my own wife. I waited another 30 minutes or so, which feels like a fucking lifetime when you're scared. Finally, I decided I wasn't going to spend the night hiding in the bathroom, so I got down on my knees and peered under the door. I almost expected to see her face peeking back at me, but thankfully I didn't. I could see straight down the hallway to the top of the stairs, but no Lynn. I didn't know if I should be happy about that or not. I looked for a few minutes, waiting to see her head pop up over the step, but it never came. I stood up, my hand hovering over the door, and mentally prepared myself to open it. Slowly, I turned the lock with shaky fingers and was about to yank it open when I heard a sound that still makes me feel nauseous when I think about it. A moan, louder than before, but this time I was able to tell just where it was coming from. I turned my head to the closet door as if in slow motion and locked my eyes with my wife who was peeking out at me from the slight gap. Her eyes were still wide as ever and her mouth was hanging open in the most grotesque gaping smile I had ever seen. I didn't scream. I was too scared for even that. Her hands were clasped to her chest, body trembling with sheer delight as if she could barely contain her excitement. A short, raspy moan bubbled up from her throat, deep and raw, sending a shiver through my entire body. Somehow I found the ability to pull the bathroom door open and ran fast as I could all the way down the steps, snagging my keys and phone from the table in the living room before running outside my car. I could hear her shrill laughter all behind me, but I didn't hear her getting closer. I didn't bother shutting the front door. I drove away from the house faster than I legally should have, shivering the entire time, either from fear or the cold, maybe a little bit of both. I hadn't grabbed a coat or even a pair of shoes. I was still in my boxers and my hair was still damp. I drove straight to my brother Chris's house, about 40 minutes away, ignoring any and every call and text I got. I didn't check my phone until I was safely parked in my brother's driveway. Lynn had called 4 times and sent a flurry of texts, all wondering where I'd gone and why I left like that. I threw my phone at the dash in rage, furious at her nonchalant attitude. My brother and his wife were surprised to see me, especially dressed in just a pair of boxers, but told me to stay as long as I needed. Chris lent me some clothes and asked me what happened. I told him Lynn and I had a fight, but I didn't get into details. I didn't want him to think I was overreacting, leaving my wife over a prank, even if it was a strange one. I mean, hadn't I encouraged her for years to lighten up instead of being so serious all the time? I had wanted her to relax and loosen up, but this was definitely not what I had in mind. I tried to sleep on their sofa, but my brain wouldn't let me sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lynn's face staring at me from inside the closet. Knowing she'd been in there with me the entire time made my skin crawl. She'd never left the fucking bathroom at all. Instead, she slipped inside the closet and slammed the bathroom door shut to fool me. The mere thought of going back home gave me anxiety. I tossed and turned, unable to sleep. Chris ended up giving me a sleeping pill so I was able to get a little rest. My sleep was filled with terrible dreams, all of Lynn's smiling face. I woke up just as the sun started to rise. My sore body ached from the sofa and I felt drained. I knew I'd have to call Lynn at some point, but I didn't know what to say to her. I wouldn't be going home unless she gave me her word she'd never do any more creepy shit. I just wanted my wife back. Her normal, serious, never looked so good to me. I was contemplating calling her and telling her that when the familiar feeling came over me. I was being watched. I was staring at the ceiling, my heart in my throat. I didn't want to look away, but the longer I ignored the feeling, the worse it got. My eyes drifted from the ceiling almost on their own. Her face was pressed up against the window beside the couch, staring down at me with that same gaping smile. Drool dribbled down her lips, leaving 2 long streaks down the glass. I didn't know how long she'd been there, but something told me she'd been there quite a while, possibly all night. I didn't bother screaming, though I was afraid. Anger trumped any fear I felt in that moment. I jumped up from the couch and pounded my palm against the glass. Lynn, are you crazy? What the hell is wrong with you? Just go home, I shouted. Now! She didn't move, and her ghastly expression never changed. If anything, her smile only grew, as if she had never been more elated. I could hear Chris and his wife moving around upstairs, as if Lynn could hear them from her place outside. Her head twitched slightly in their direction, and she began to close her mouth slowly. Chris called my name from upstairs, obviously concerned. I turned to see him and his wife Rebecca hurrying down the steps. When I turned back to the window, Lynn was gone. The only sign she'd been there at all was the 2 streaks of drool still dribbling down the glass. I tried to explain to Chris and Rebecca about waking up to see Lynn watching me through their window. They were skeptical. Who wouldn't be? Chris and I went outside to the spot in the front of the window, but there were no footprints in the dirt, just a slight indent. Animal, probably, Chris guessed, and I didn't argue. He and Rebecca assumed I dreamt the entire episode, but they didn't understand, and I was too tired to explain it to them. I called out of work that day and turned off my cell phone. I didn't want to face Lynn. Just talking to her was too much for me at that point. I really started to believe something was irreversibly wrong with her, that no matter what promises she made, we'd never be the same again. The thought saddened me to my core. I cried most of the morning. By noon, I figured I was ready to confront her, give her one last chance to explain herself. I could at least give her that after 6 years. I told myself. I turned my phone on and saw the dozens of texts she'd sent, all from seemingly concerned wife. Can we talk? I love you. Please call me. I'm really worried. Can you answer? Just come home. And more of the same. All texts telling me she loved me and she wanted me home, how worried she was. Not a damn one addressing the crazy shit she pulled, like she hadn't been acting like a character from a Stephen King book. Even her texts were different. She normally texted novels just to tell me to pick up a loaf of bread. You'd think she'd have more to say to me after her bizarre shenanigans. I knew it probably seems childish to some of you who are miles away from the situation, but if you saw the way Lynn had looked at me, how she scampered away on all fours like some wild animal, grinning at me from the inside of the closet like a lunatic, then I think you'd find my reaction was warranted. Ended up staying with Chris and Rebecca for another night. I didn't wake up until yesterday afternoon, and thankfully I didn't see Lynn's face watching me through the window. I don't want to pry because it's not my place, but is this fight something that can be mended? Rebecca asked. She made us both a sandwich for lunch, and I knew she wanted to breach the subject without seeming to be nosy. I don't know, she's like a different person, I said, choosing my words carefully. I still wasn't ready for her or Chris to know the full extent of the batshit craziness I had been dealing with. People change, Ben, but she's still the same woman you married. Maybe you both just need to talk through whatever issues. Whatever's going on, I'm sure it can be fixed, she said, ever the peacemaker. I think it's beyond that now. I don't think talking would help. I just don't trust her, I said. The words stung in my heart. I missed and loved my wife, but how could I live with someone like that? Living in constant fear didn't sound too appealing. Lynn loves you. She has to be absolutely crushed, she said. I don't know about that, I said. Well, she certainly seemed like it to me. I've never seen her so upset. Very much unlike the Lynn I know, Rebecca said, shaking her head slightly. It took a full minute for her words to really sink in, and when they did, I felt dread worming its way through my skin. Wait, what do you mean you saw her? You saw Lynn? I asked, my mouth suddenly dry. Rebecca nodded casually, as if that fact wasn't nightmare fuel. Maybe for her it wasn't. She stopped by this morning, and just after Chris left for work, she said, cleaning my plates from the table. I didn't see her car, though. Maybe she took an Uber or something. Beck, what did she say? Did she come inside? I asked, starting to sweat. I began looking around, examining corners as though a predator lurked behind them. No, she just asked if you were awake yet, and I said that you weren't. I asked if she wanted me to wake you up, but she said no, just to let you sleep. She said that as she washed the dishes. That's all? She didn't say anything else? I asked. No, she looked awful though, like she hadn't slept in days. I think you should call her. I got up from the table and thanked Rebecca for lunch. I felt a bit better at the knowledge that at least she hadn't come inside. Still, I needed to double check that the doors were locked. I sat here a while trying to figure out what to do next. I didn't want to go home, but I felt that I owed it to Lynn to help her if I could. Hadn't I sworn an oath to love and honor her through sickness and health? Clearly, she was very sick. If she was sick, which I truly believe she was, I had to try to get her the help she needed. But I didn't even know where to start. I didn't want to call the police, and besides, what the hell was I going to tell them? That my wife was peeking at me, that she had been being creepy? As bizarre as she'd been, she still hadn't committed any crime. Not yet, anyway. The police would have probably said that I was overreacting, but this wasn't some prank. It felt wrong, dangerous even, like something sinister lurked beneath her smile. I knew as her husband that I was well within my rights to have her committed, but what if she simply acted normal in their presence? She obviously had been able to fool Rebecca into thinking that she was just a concerned wife. As long as the doctors didn't find her to be a danger to herself or others, they'd have no choice but to release her after 72 hours. I felt lost and overwhelmed. So I did what any husband in my position would do. I called her mother. I didn't want to, believe me. Her mother, Marianne, and I were never on the best of terms. We'd never fought or anything like that. She just wasn't a very warm person. It wasn't really easy to get along with. She hardly ever smiled, and when she did, only her lips would move into a thin lipped smile, leaving her eyes as blank as before. She gave off this aura that felt like she was permanently on the offensive. I'd only met her twice, and both times were for such short visits. I got the impression she didn't approve of me for her daughter. Lynn always ushered us out quickly as she didn't want me to feel uncomfortable, which I was grateful for. Being in her mother's company almost felt unbearable, like walking on glass. I was glad when we moved 3 states away so we didn't have to see her often. I was happy to avoid the woman, but I needed her help. I didn't really want to talk to her at all, but I had to talk to someone, and someone who knew Lynn better than I did, so I grit my teeth and I did what I had to do. Yes, she answered, already sounding irritated. Marianne, it's me. Do you have a minute to talk? I asked. I could hear her cluck her tongue in irritation. I'm in the middle of writing some checks, but if you insist, I suppose I can spare a moment. What is it you want to discuss, Benjamin? She said coolly. It's about Lynn. She's been acting strangely, and I was wondering if you had any idea whether there was something. I was quickly interrupted. It's a bit difficult to follow your rambling, Benjamin. What is it that you want from me? She asked. I could almost see her standing there in her thin sweater and slacks, tapping her fingernails impatiently on the table. I wanted to know if you'd ever noticed any odd behavior or possibly any mental health issues, I asked. There was a long, uncomfortable pause, and I couldn't tell if she was thinking or something else. Finally, after a few seconds, she spoke. I'm not sure if this is one of your jokes, Benjamin, but if so, I don't find humor in it. Now, I do have business to attend to, as I've said, so if you don't mind, she said, but I cut her off before she could get rid of me. Marianne, it's not a joke. I'm sincerely concerned about Lynn's mental health. Her behavior has been very erratic lately. I am very worried about her, and I figured as her mother you would be as well. I said, my frustration evident in my voice. If you're truly concerned, then I suggest you get the health professionals involved. I don't know what you're expecting of me. She snapped. I could tell she was seconds away from hanging up, and for some reason I was desperate not to let her. I had the feeling that she knew a lot more than she was letting on. Please, if not for me, do it for Lynn, I tried. I heard a faint, shaky intake of breath as if she were trying to hold her steely persona together but failing. Yan, what's. I started. Benjamin, I don't know what to tell you. My only advice would be to seek professional help and do not call here again. Goodbye. I tried to call out to her, but she hung up. I tried to wrap my head around the call and her refusal to help me. Even if she didn't like me, why wouldn't she want me to help her own daughter? I couldn't understand. I tried to replay the conversation, desperate to find something I missed. After a while, I almost gave up until I remembered her last words to me: seek professional help. She said those words with a bit of urgency. I could have just been grasping at straws, but no, I was sure her voice had changed ever so slightly when she'd said that, as if they were very important. What did she mean? I assumed she'd been referring to medical professionals, but maybe she was referring to someone else, someone that she didn't, for some reason, feel comfortable saying directly, or maybe I was just desperate. I waited for Chris to get home, and after a very long and exhausting conversation with him and Rebecca, I convinced them that Lynn truly needed psychiatric help. I didn't tell them everything. I wasn't prepared to go into it yet, but I told them about our last encounter, how she'd hidden in the bathroom peeking at me from the closet. They were obviously shocked, but thankfully they believed me. They just wanted to help her too. Still, they didn't think it was all that serious. Weird, maybe, but not dangerous. They just kept saying that Lynn had to be playing some kind of weird joke, maybe for YouTube, Rebecca offered, if only half-heartedly. Chris didn't think we should involve the police yet. He offered instead to go with me, and I readily accepted. He reasoned that calmly talking to her, trying to coax her into going willingly, was the best recourse. I had agreed to do it his way. At least I wouldn't be going into the house alone. We drove over this morning just after breakfast. There was no way that I was going at night. When we pulled into the driveway, my stomach began doing somersaults. Her car wasn't there, but I still didn't let my guard down. The front door was ajar, and for a split second, I thought we'd see her eyes staring through the gap. I was shaking and starting to sweat. Chris, however, was fine. He waited for me to open the door, his hands in his pockets like he was going on a fucking stroll through the park. I envied his ignorance. I pushed the door open and was immediately hit with the stench of rot. Chris smelled it too, and he walked in the house behind me with his nose scrunched up. What do you guys use to clean the floors around here? Shit, Chris mumbled. Shut up, I said, my eyes darting around for any signs of Lynn. The house was deadly quiet, dark despite being 10 in the morning. All the curtains were closed up tight, refusing to allow any sunlight inside. If I hadn't left it just 2 days prior, I'd have thought the house to be abandoned. We moved through each room, carefully checking any place that she might hide, occasionally calling her name. Why the fuck are you looking under the couch? Chris asked eventually. Aren't we looking for your wife? He was looking at me like I was a moron. Let's just go upstairs, I whispered. He shook his head but followed me up the stairs to check the bathroom and spare bedroom. On the way up, my shoes crunched over pieces of glass that looked to be littered over a few of the steps. I noticed that one of Lynn and my wedding portraits that had been hung on the wall along the staircase had been smashed. The frame hung crookedly, all the glass removed. I stared at the picture, a lump forming in my throat. We had taken that photo just after leaving the church, after saying our vows. She looked so beautiful in her white gown. I looked at Lynn's beautiful face. I'd never dreamt her face would ever be a source of terror to me. We climbed the rest of the steps and checked the spare bedroom, but it looked completely untouched. I was hesitant to go in the bathroom, my fear from that night coming back to me all at once. Chris noticed and offered to go in by himself, but I wouldn't let him do that. So we walked in together, checking the closet and the shower. The bathroom looked as if it hadn't been touched since the night I left. I don't think she's here, Ben. Why don't you pack some clothes and we'll try to come back tomorrow or something, Chris said. I nodded and went into our bedroom and shoved some clothes into a duffel bag. When I checked inside her closet, I came across the source of the smell and gagged. Chris took one look and lost all color in his face. He had to go stand by the stairs to get away from the sight and the smell. I gazed down in shock at what lay inside my bedroom closet. Soaking into the rug were at least a dozen eyeballs, all carefully laid out in pairs. Some were as large as a quarter, while others were tiny as a marble. I stared down at the eyes she'd collected from small animals and wondered how she'd gotten them, and I shuddered at the thought. Man, I thought I had it bad with Becca's shoe addiction. But fuck me. Your wife's in here collecting eyeballs, Chris said, gagging. Ben, I think we should go, he called from the hall. I'm getting nauseous. All right. I grabbed my duffel and shut the closet door on my new nightmare. I stepped out into the hall and took a deep breath of air. I could taste the rot on my tongue and couldn't help but gag. Who the fuck lines up eyeballs in their closet like that? Chris mumbled. I tried to tell you she needed help. She doesn't need help, Ben. She needs a fucking exorcist, he said. You coming or what? I can't stand the smell anymore. His words died in his throat and his eyes grew wide with fear. I didn't ask him why. I could feel it. Someone was watching me, and I didn't think it was the eyes in the closet. I turned around, my eyes slowly scanning the bedroom. Christ, I whispered as I finally saw what we'd missed. Under the bed, curled on her side, watching us with the excitement of a kid on Christmas morning, was my wife. She held her hands together just under her chin. They were shaking eagerly. Now that she knew she had been found, I could hear the quiet noises she was making, a sort of hiccuping sound in her throat, as if the excitement was just too much for her. It was unnerving to say the least. Wide eyes and that same huge smile. Everything in me told me to run, but I forced it away. This was my wife. No matter how twisted she was still the woman I married. I had to help her. Lynn? I said softly. She didn't respond, but her head bobbed back and forth in two quick little movements as if she were nodding. Baby, I just want to help, okay? Can you let me do that? I asked. I had taken a single step forward, approaching her like some kind of dangerous animal. I love you, Lynn, I said, softly taking another step closer. She let a tiny moan escape her wide open mouth, and I had to resist the urge to run. Her shoulders were starting to quiver, and her eyes grew large as saucers. I crouched down so I could see her better and immediately saw the blood. Her hands were covered in it. They trembled more the closer I got, as if she was barely able to contain herself. Lynn, are you hurt? You're bleeding, I said. She bobbed her head again, her bloody fingers moving up and down as if playing an invisible piano. They occasionally grazed her skin, leaving smears of blood on her skin. I wanted to recoil in disgust. The smell that was coming off her was revolting. I could feel the vomit trying to climb my throat. Her lips were dry and stretched thin, blood seeping through the cracks. I knew she wouldn't come out on her own, but I didn't want to leave her in the state she was in. I scooted closer and reached out to her. The excited hiccuping sounds got louder and her hands shook, fingers flexing. It was then that I could see the blood oozing from between her fingers. Oh my God, Lynn, you're bleeding, I said, instinctively reaching out to take her hand. But before I could even touch her, her hand sprang out towards me. A sharp pain shot through my arm and I fell back on my ass. My arm burned and I could see the blood dripping on down onto the carpet. I looked back at her in shock and saw her grinning madly, her fingers clutching a large shard of glass. You all right in there? Chris asked from behind me. I turned my head slightly and nodded to him, cradling my arm to my chest. When I turned back to face Lynn, I saw that her focus had shifted. She wasn't looking at me anymore. She wasn't smiling anymore either. She was staring past me, her eyes glaring at Chris the way a hungry lion might stare at an antelope. Her mouth was still hanging open, but it was twisted into a snarl. I got to my feet and began walking backwards down the hall, afraid to take my eyes off her. Are you bleeding? Chris asked. The moment the words left his mouth, Lynn started fast scooting out from under the bed, the glass shard still in her fist. Run, Chris, go, I yelled. He must have been too afraid to move because a second later I felt my back bump into him. He was still standing at the top of the stairs, staring at the horror that was my wife. Lynn had crawled completely out from under the bed and stood in the bedroom doorway, her face twisted in rage. Her whole body was visibly tense. Blood ran down her fingers and onto the floor. Jesus, Lynn, Chris said, playing hide and seek? I reached back and pushed him towards a step. Move your ass, Chris, I said, quietly but firmly as I could. Lynn bobbed her head in fast, sharp motions and began to grin, stretching her mouth open wider and wider so that her chin seemed to touch her chest. I heard Chris mutter a prayer and then he was running down the stairs. I stood at the top of the steps, stuck between the love for a woman who clearly needed serious help and self preservation. I only want to help, I said, choking back tears. Her eyes focused on me once again, and then she slowly lifted the glass, holding it out in front of her. And then she started sprinting towards me, grinning with utter excitement. Thankfully, my body took over, and I flew down the stairs, skipping two or three at a time. I made it to the front door before I felt her leap onto my back, wrapping her arms around my neck, her open mouth next to my ear so I could hear those terrible hiccuping sounds up close. I shook her off me, knocking her to the floor. I felt a searing pain in my back as she went, but I tore open the front door and bolted to my car. Chris was standing in the front yard talking on the phone with police. I didn't say a word. I just ran to my car and jumped in. Chris took the hint and followed me, still on the line with 911. I watched in the rearview mirror, sure I'd seen her there, running after us, but I never did. We went straight to the ER and I got 11 stitches in my arm and 3 on my back. The police asked a lot of questions and went back to the house to do a search, but of course, Lynn wasn't there. They advised me to stay with a friend or relative for a while and to file a restraining order as soon as I could, but none of those things would matter. Somehow I just knew. I dropped Chris off at home and went to a motel an hour away. I wanted to put as much distance between me and Lynn as I could. This is where I've been for the last 4 hours. I thought maybe the police would find her. Maybe they'd get the help she desperately needs. But now I don't think so, because 40 minutes ago I got a text from an unknown number, just 3 words. I found you. And a picture attached. The picture was dark and grainy, but I instantly knew what it was. There was no mistaking my wife's eye. I started typing this out immediately. I don't know what to do. I'm alone and scared, and I can't help but feel that I'm being watched. I hate the idea of something like peeking around the corner and like when you see it, it just like out of your sight.
Mhm.
I hate the idea of that. That's why this one creeped me out so
It's
much.
almost like his wife was, like something, like, took over her life, you know what I mean? Like, she was replaced with, like, this creepy thing.
Well, some of the
'Cause, like, even her behavior and, like, her texting is off.
yeah, but some of the comments, like one of the comments was talking about how her mom acted weird
Mhm.
and, that, like, it seemed like the mother-in-law knows something, and someone said that they think that the wife creeped on her mother her whole childhood, and who wouldn't be a bit offensive if you had to raise a child like that.
When the when Rebecca was talking to him while washing the dishes, I was like, "Oh my god, now it's Rebecca."
"Rebecca, no!"
This one is from the subreddit Creepy Encounters, and it's titled "The Man I Saw Through My Night Vision Scope." I'm a hunter. I like to hunt wild boar specifically, though I have been deer hunting and have been known to get a turkey for Thanksgiving. I mostly hunt boar. For those that don't know, boar are a big problem in the United States. A sow can have 2 litters a year, and it's not uncommon for a litter to consist of 10 or more pigs. Given that pigs eat anything and everything, it's not hard to see why the Department of Fish and Wildlife makes it legal to hunt them with almost no restrictions. In my state, it's illegal to hunt most large mammals with night or thermal vision scopes, with the exception of boar and coyote. I'd been saving for a year, mostly fun money, and it's hard to explain to your wife that a scope that cost literally twice as much as the rifle I was mounting it on was worth it. But I did it. I took it to the range and I sighted it in. There was an area that was peppered with boar activity that I knew would be perfect for a night hunt. It was easily accessible with my truck, with easy to find spots that I could set up in that overlooked a large, easy to navigate clearing. That night started uneventful, mostly me tinkering with my new toy, cycling through the settings. I was a little impatient. I'd spotted multiple deer, but they were out of season, and like I mentioned earlier, my current setup wasn't legal for deer. I moved to another spot I'd seen several days earlier. That probably wasn't much better than my first, but it gave me something to do and a new angle to look around with my new scope. After an hour or so of glassing the area, it dawned on me. This spot doesn't have much animal activity at all. No rabbit or owls. The deer I'd seen were hundreds of yards from where I was. Why was this pocket of land so dead at night but lively in the day? I'd set up around 10 p.m., and it was about 2 a.m. when I started to think about packing up. Maybe setting up a target before I left and taking some practice shots. I heard a crunch come from the direction I came from before. I panned my scope over and saw the silhouette of a small bear pushing through the bushes. It's important to note that my scope isn't exactly night vision, it's a thermal scope, kind of like black and white version of what you see in the Predator movies. I adjusted my range and zoomed in a little. I remember jolting a little when I saw that it wasn't really a bear, it was a man. Because he was so low and hunched over, I thought I was looking at a young bear. Is that a game warden? It couldn't be. I would have seen the headlights coming up the road from where I was perched and where he could have walked in from. I was 30 miles away from anything and on public lands. I was about to call out when I adjusted my sights and noticed he was naked. No shoes, pants, or anything. I remember being disturbed by his movements like a squirrel or something, twitchy and grabbing at the foliage, sniffing around and palming the tree. Was that my tree? The one I'd been leaning against earlier? The thought terrified me. Could he smell me? Then he did something I still have nightmares about. He squatted and placed his hands in the dirt between his feet and stared straight up like a dog mid howl. And I heard it, a voice coming from that direction, a very compelling female voice. Help, I'm lost. There was a long pause, but neither of us moved a muscle. The center of my sights was trained at the dirt in front of his feet. I couldn't bring myself to aim directly at another person. It went against everything I'd been taught about firearms. Were they lost? Was this some guy that had gone crazy out here? Why was his voice so feminine? Help, please, I can't walk, the voice called out. That's when I called bullshit. Not only could he walk, when I first saw him, He was traversing the land with ease for a naked person, so good I mistook him for a bear. That's a fucking trap. This guy is trying to lure me to him with a damsel in distress routine. Luckily, the lack of activity before had caused me to pack up most of my gear. I think I may have left behind a hat and a sitting pad, but I didn't give a shit in that moment. I took my eyes off of him for a moment to get my pack on. I buckled my chest strap and scrambled for my rifle. To my horror, he was in the same position, but his face was staring in my direction, and I swear I saw him smile. The thermoscope has an effect that makes an animal's eyes appear white. How the hell had he heard me get up and put my gear on? He must have been easily 150 yards away. Fuck off, I screamed in that direction. He stood upright and it hit me how tall and skinny he was, easily 6 feet and very lean. He took a couple of long strides in my direction and I instinctively sent around, sailing above his head into the tree line. He was freaky as hell, but he hadn't really threatened me. What would I tell the cops? I was unwilling and unready to shoot someone. He stopped dead in his tracks and hunched down on all fours. The next one will fuck you up. Go away. He stayed on all fours, and this time I had my sights trained on the center of him. His eyes were just above the grass like a large cat or something. I was trying to stop my trembling and knew that my voice had cracked a little on the last warning. I was terrified that standoff probably only lasted a minute or two, maybe less, but it felt like forever. In an instant, he bolted left towards the tree line opposite the road. So much for not being able to walk. I could barely keep him in my scope, he was moving so fast. He disappeared into the brush, and I sent another bullet sailing high in his direction. I racked another round and tried to pocket that mag and swapped for a fresh one, but I dropped it and didn't bother looking for it. I wasn't far from my truck and I wanted to get out of there. I could hear him in the distance, yelling in this weird sound that could only have been a laugh or a cry. I scrambled up on the trail and arrived at my truck breathless. I tossed my gear into the cab but kept the rifle in the passenger seat and sped off. For the longest time, I told that story from the perspective of having spotted some deranged crackhead living off the land like some kind of caveman. I reported it to the Fish and Game, but all they did was scold me for hunting alone at night. Never received an update, and it wasn't until I told this story at a camping trip that my nephew told me about wendigos, rakes, and skinwalkers. My story scared the piss out of him because the spot we were camping in was technically the same forest I'd seen the bastard just 50 miles east of it. He was so spooked his mom, who was my cousin, had to take him home and she was really pissed. I've gone down the rabbit hole. One of these scary stories, I'm not saying what I saw definitely was a Wendigo or a Skinwalker. I'm just saying if such thing exists, I may have dodged quite the bullet that night. Or maybe it was just a tweaker being Donnie Thornberry in the middle of the night. Either way, I thought I'd share.
I don't like that because I don't like the idea of camping in the woods because I'm
Yeah.
scared of things in the woods,
Mhm.
and I really don't like that. Also, I feel like it's not the Wendigo or the Skinwalker because I feel like they still would have went after him, but I don't think it's a tweaker.
Definitely not a tweaker.
No tweaker has that kind of grace.
I'm just imagining.
I love the wild thornberries. Okay, so my next story also comes from the thread Are No Sleep. It's titled Something Walks Whistling Past My House Every Night at 3:03. Something walks whistling past my house every night, no matter the weather. Something walks down our street whistling softly. You could only hear it if you're in the living room or the kitchen when they walk by, and it always starts at exactly 3:03. The sound starts faint, somewhere near the beginning of the lane near the Carson place. We're towards the middle of the street, so the whistling moves past us before fading away in the direction of the cul-de-sac. When I was younger, my sister and I would sneak into the kitchen some nights to listen. Mom and Dad didn't like that, and we catch hell if they found us out there, but they were never too hard on us because we always stuck to the one big rule. Don't try to look at whatever was whistling. My neighborhood is a funny place. I've lived here since I was 6 and I love it. The houses are small but well kept. There's good sized yards, plenty of places to roam. There were a lot of other kids here my age. I turned 13 back in October. We grew up together and would always play foursquare in the cul-de-sac or roam from back porch to back porch in the summer. This was a good place to grow up. I'm old enough to see it. And there's only two strange things here: the night whistling and the good luck. The whistling never bothered me much, like I said. I couldn't even hear it from my bedroom. But mom and dad don't like talking about it, so I've stopped asking questions. My dad is a strong guy, tall and calm. Has an accent since he moved to the US as a kid. His family, his grandparents, they're from the islands. That's what they call it. My dad, the only time he isn't so calm is if the whistler comes up. He talks a little quicker then, eyes move faster, and he tells us not to think about it so much and to always remember the one rule, the big rule. Don't try to look outside when the whistler goes past. Not that we could even look if we wanted. See, there are shutters on the inside of every window, thick pieces of heavy canvas that pull down from the top and latch to the bottom of the window frame. Every latch even has a small lock, about the size of what you'd find on a diary. My dad locks those shutters every night before we all go to bed and keeps the key in his room. My mom, I don't know what she thinks about the whistling. I've seen her out in the living room before 3:03 when the sound starts. I could see her if I cracked my door open, just an inch to peek. She's not out there often. At least I haven't caught her much. But once or twice a month, I think she sits out there on our big red couch just listening. The Whistler has the same tune every night. It's cheerful. Remember how I said there were two odd things about where I live? Well, besides our night whistler, everyone in my neighborhood is really lucky. It's hard to explain, and dad doesn't like us talking about that part much either. But good things seem to happen to people around here a lot. Usually it's small things, winning a radio contest or getting an unexpected promotion at work or finding some arrowheads buried in the yard, the authentic kind. The weather is pretty good and there's no crime, and everybody's gardens bloom extra bright in the fall. A million little blessings I've heard my mom say about living here, but the main reason we stay here, why we have moved here in the first place, is my sister Nola. She was born very sick, something with her lungs. We couldn't even bring her home when she was born, only visit her in the hospital. She was so small, I remember. Small even compared to the other babies. A machine had to breathe for her. We moved into our house here to be closer to the hospital. As soon as we moved here, Nola started getting better. The doctors couldn't figure it out. They chalked it up to whatever they were doing, but we could all tell they were confused. But my parents knew, even I knew, Nola getting better was just one of the million little blessings we got from living in our neighborhood. So that's why we stayed even after we found out that for every small miracle that happens here every day, now and then some bad things happen, but they only happen if you look for the whistler. See, our neighborhood has a welcoming committee. They show up with macaroni casserole and a gift basket and a manila folder whenever someone new moves in. They're very friendly. 4 people showed up when we moved in 7 years ago. The committee made small talk, gave me a Snickers bar, and took turns holding Nola. It was her first week out of the hospital, so they were extra careful. Then the committee asked to speak to my parents in private, so I was sent to my room where I still managed to hear nearly every word. The welcoming committee told my parents about how nice the neighborhood was, really exceptionally hard to explain, kind of nice. And when they told my parents about the even harder to explain whistling that happened every morning at 3:03 and ended at the tick of 3:05, the group, our new neighbors, warned my parents that the whistling was quiet, would never harm or hurt us as long as we didn't look for what was making the sound. This part they stressed, and I pushed my ear to the door, straining to hear them. People who went looking for the whistler had their luck change, sometimes tragically. A black cloud would hang over anyone that looked. Anything that could go wrong would. The manila envelope that the committee brought over contained newspaper clippings, stories about car crashes and ruined lives, public deaths, and freak accidents. Not everybody dies, I heard the head of the committee tell my dad, but the life goes out of them. Even if they live, there's no light in them ever again, no presence. My mom, I could tell she wasn't taking it seriously. She kept asking if this was some kind of prank they play on new neighbors. At one point, my mom got angry, accused the committee of trying to scare us out of our new home, asked them if they were racist on account of my dad being from the islands. My dad calmed her down, told her that he could tell our neighbors were sincere and that they were just trying to help us. He explained that he grew up hearing these kinds of stories from his mom and that he knew there were strange things that walked among us. Some of those strange things were good and some were bad, but most were just different. After the committee left, my dad went to the hardware store, bought the canvas blinds, the latches, and the locks, and installed them on every window in our house after dinner. That first night in our new house, I crept out of my room at 3 a.m., only to find my dad sitting awake on the living room couch holding my baby sister. My dad held up his finger in a shh motion, but patted the couch next to him. I sat and we waited. At exactly 3:03, we heard the whistling. It ca it came and it went just like our neighbors said. The whistling returns each night, and we never look, and we enjoy our million little blessings here every day. Nola breathes on her own, and she's grown into a strong, clever girl. My dad even joined the welcoming committee. We don't get new neighbors often. Why would anyone want to leave? But when a new family moves in, my dad gets the committee to bring them a macaroni casserole, a gift basket, and the manila folder. I can always tell by the look on my dad's face when he comes back if the family took the committee seriously or if we will be getting new neighbors again very soon. Not long ago, a family moved in directly next to us. The previous owner, Miss Maddie, passed away at age 105. She lived a good long life. Our new neighbors seemed like they would fit in just fine. They believed the welcoming committee, took my dad's advice about locking shutters since they had a young child of their own. Whatever newspaper clippings that were in the manila folder, whatever evidence, my dad never let us see, but I imagine it must have been awfully convincing since our neighbors got along with no issues for the first month. One night, when our new neighbors had to leave town, they sent their son, Holden, to stay with us. He was 12, a year under me in school. I didn't know him well before that night, but as soon as his parents dropped him off at dinner, I could tell it was going to be a bad time. Do you know who's always out there whistling every night? Holden asked the moment the adults left the room. The three of us were sitting in the den, some Disney movie playing idly on the television. My sister and I exchanged a glance. We don't talk about that, I said. I think it's that weirdo that lives in the big yellow house on the corner, Holden said. Mr. Tolles? My sister asked. No way, he's really nice. Holden shrugged. Must be a psycho killer then. Nola tensed. We don't talk about it, I repeated. Let's go in my room and play Nintendo. We spent the next few hours playing games, eating popcorn, and then watching movies, a typical sleepover, but I could see Holden getting antsy. After my parents had wished us a good night, locked the blinds, and gone to bed, Holden stood up from his beanbag and walked over to where Nola and I were sitting on my bed. Have you ever tried looking? He asked. It's nearly time. Like most sleepovers, we conveniently ignored any suggestion of a bedtime. I was shocked to see he was right. It was almost 3 a.m. I sighed. We don't. See, I can't. I can't even try to look because my dad locks the blinds every night and hides the key, he continued, ignoring me. So does our dad, said Nola. No, replied Holden. No, he doesn't. You saw him do it, I said, a little sharper than I meant to sound. Holden grinned. Your dad locks the blinds, yeah, but he doesn't hide the key. He keeps it right on his normal keychain. So, I asked, worried I already knew what he was going to say next. Because I had noticed that my dad didn't bother hiding this key anymore after all the years, because he knew we took it seriously. So after your dad locked up, but before your parents went to bed, I went to the bathroom, and on my way, I may have peeked into their room, and I may have seen your dad's keychain on his nightstand, and I may have went and borrowed the key to the blinds. Nola and I stared, and his grin only grew wider. You're lying, I said. Holden shrugged. You can check if you want. Just open your parents' door and look. You'll see this keychain right there on the nightstand. Stay here, I told both of them. Don't move a muscle. I hurried to my parents' room but hesitated at the door. If Holden wasn't lying, my dad would be angry, beyond angry. I was scared thinking about it, but more scared of an open window with the whistler right outside. I opened the door barely an inch and looked in, but it was too dark to see. Taking a deep breath, I walked into the room. 2 steps into the dark, I froze. The whistling started, and I could hear it clearly from my parents' room. I never realized, but they must have heard that sound every night since we moved into the house. They never told us. I don't think I could have slept through it. I stood there, listening to the whistling come closer, unsure whether I should turn on a light or call out for my dad. Soft sounds from the living room brought me back to reality. Nola, I yelled, running out of my parents' room. Holden and Nola was standing near the door next to a window. Holden wasn't lying. I could see him fumbling with the lock on one of the blinds. I heard a click. He did have the key. Holden let out a quick laugh. Nola stood next to him, hunched up, afraid but maybe curious. The whistling was right outside her house now. I think I made a sound, called out, I can't remember. Time felt frozen, clock hands nailed to the face, but I found myself moving. I'm not fast. I've never been athletic. Somehow, though, I covered the space between myself and Nola in a moment. My eyes were locked on her, but I heard Holden pull the blind all the way down so it would release. I heard the snap of it start to raise, and I heard the whistling just on the other side of the window. But I had my arms around Nola and I turned us so she was facing away from the window. At the same time, I jammed my eyes shut. The blind whipped open. The whistling stopped. I felt Nola shaking in my arms. Don't look, okay? I told her, don't turn around. We were positioned so that she was facing back towards the hallway and I was facing the window. My eyes were still closed. I felt her nod into my shoulder. I reached out with my arm, not holding Nola, and tried to touch Holden. My hand brushed against his arm. He was shaking worse than Nola. Holden? I asked. Silence. I reached past him and gingerly felt for the window. My eyes still sealed shut. The glass was cold against my fingertips, colder than it should have been for the time of year. I moved my hand up the window, searching for the string to the blind. The glass began to get warmer. The further I reached, there was a gentle hum feeding back into my fingertips. I tried not to think about what that might be on the other side of the window. Finally, I touched the string and yanked the blind shut. I closed my eyes. In the dim light leaking out from the kitchen, I could make out Holden, pale and small, staring at the now closed window. Holden, I asked. He turns toward me and he screamed. Everything became a flurry of motion. Lights sparked on in the hall, then the living room. My parents' footsteps thudded across the hardwood floor. I didn't turn to look back at them. My eyes were glued to Holden. He was pale. He had bit his lips so hard that there was a thin red line of blood running down his chin, and he'd wet himself. What happened? My dad asked from behind me. I managed to swivel away from Holden and look back. He looked. I'd never seen my dad scared before, but I saw it that night. In that moment, an old ugly terror stitched on his face, a parent's fear. Just Holden, he mouthed to me. Yes. My dad let out a breath. He looked so relieved. I nearly expected him to cheer, but then he turned to Holden and my dad's face changed. I wonder if he felt bad for feeling good that Holden was the only one that looked. There was a knock at the door. We all froze. Holden whimpered. Don't answer it, my mom said. She stood at the threshold of the hall. I'd always thought she was a skeptic and just humored my dad about the windows and the whistler, but that night we were all believers. I noticed that both of my parents held baseball bats they must have taken from their bedroom. A knock came again, a little louder this time. Please don't open the door, Holden whispered. My dad walked over to him, hugged him close. We won't, my dad promised, still holding his bat. Nothing is coming in here tonight. Thud, thud, thud. Call the police. Sorry. Thud, thud, thud. This time the knocking was growing enough to rattle the door. Holden screamed again, and Nola clutched her arms around my neck. My mom came over and knelt down next to us, wrapping my sister and me close. Thud, thud, thud. Call the police, my mom whispered to my dad. The knocking instantly stopped. My dad looked over his shoulder at us. Do you think? He was cut off by frantic knocking that trailed off to a polite tap, tap, tap. Police, something said from the other side of the door. The voice from outside sounded exactly like my mom, like a parrot repeating the words back to her. Police, call the police. Tap, tap, tap. Police. My mom pulled us closer. Police, 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 police. Please stop, I heard her whisper. I don't think calling them will help, my dad said. How will we know when they're the ones at the door? The knocking came back harder than before. The door shook, then it stopped. After a long moment, I heard the knocking again, but it was coming from our back door. We all turned together towards the back door, but the knocking immediately turned to the front door. Front to back to front, loud then quiet, then loud again. Suddenly, the sound was coming from both doors at once, big, heavy blows like a sledgehammer. Then something started raping against all of the windows in the house, then the walls. It was like we were living inside a drum with a dozen people trying to play at once, or we were a turtle and something was attempting to claw at us from our shell. Stop, Holden yelled. I won't tell, Holden said, staring at the door. I promise I won't tell anyone what I saw. Just please go away. We waited for nearly a minute, then we heard it, a soft tap, tap, tap coming from the window Holden had looked through earlier. Holden started to cry, sobbing like a prisoner watching the gallows be built outside their cell. My dad held him, brushed his hair, but never lied to him, never told him things would be okay. The tapping at the window went on for the rest of the night. We huddled together in the living room for I don't know how long. Eventually, my mom tried to take us kids into my room while my dad stayed to watch the door. But the second we moved into my bedroom, the knocking came back, so loud it was impossible to ignore. I was afraid the door couldn't take it. When we went back to the living room and the knocking stopped, only the tap, tap, tap on the window remained. None of us slept that night. The tapping stopped around 7 a.m. That's about the time the sun comes up. We waited for another 2 hours before my dad opened the blinds from one window. He made us all go back to my parents' bedroom first. I heard him open the door and then come back. Okay, he told us, it's done. Holden's parents came back around lunchtime. My mom and dad walked Holden over to his house and they all went inside for quite a while. Nola and I watched from the window. She stuck to me the whole day, right at my side, sometimes holding my hand. When my parents came back, they looked grim but wouldn't tell us what they said to Holden's family. It was Sunday, so we all spent the day together, ordered pizza, and watched movies. That night, everyone slept in my room. Nola and my mom in bed with me, and my dad in a chair he'd pulled over. There was no knocking that night or any night since. We didn't see much of Holden or his parents for the rest of that week, but by Thursday there was a moving truck in their driveway. Nolan and I watched them packing up the whole afternoon after school. What sticks with me the most is how tired Holden and his parents looked. All three of them had the same paler, grim mouths and lightless eyes. Even from across the street, I could tell something was very wrong. Holden and his family were gone before sunset. I remember what the original welcoming committee said to my parents when we moved in. Not everyone who looks at the Whistler dies, but even those that live have the light of them go out for the rest of their lives and are full of misfortune. A million little tragedies. I think Holden's parents must have looked either to comfort him if they didn't believe or share the burden if they did. I watched Nola some days happy and young and alive, and I wonder if I had been slower, if she'd looked out the window that night, would I have looked too? to comfort her, to share that burden. I'm glad I don't have to find out. We still live in that house in the neighborhood. We still hear our whistler walking past every night. The blessings, the luck, the good things here that are too good to leave, but we're careful. We don't have friends to spend the night anymore. And my dad hides the key to the blinds very, very well. Not that I've gone looking. Some things you don't need to look for.
Thank
I
God it didn't like continue haunting them.
know. I know. I was worried at first. I totally live in this neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
Like, just not look. Well, you think the cats, like, do you- my cats have to look outside. Do you think if they look outside, the whistler's gonna like ruin their lives?
I think cats just cause enough chaos. They're like, they're fine.
Because that'd be really sad.
Doing my work for me. Dude, one of the cats, so I keep like water on my bed sometimes, like on the back of my bed. And one of my cats knocked my water over the other day and it just went all over the place. And this isn't the first time it's happened though, so like maybe I should stop doing this. But another time I had water on my bed and they knocked it over onto my head when I was sleeping in the middle of the night. So my head was soaked, my pillow was soaked, my entire side of the bed was soaked.
I just
It was
imagine.
fucking awful.
I just imagine one of the little douchebags sticking their paw in there to like get the little water and
Yes.
drinking it.
Ginger does that. It's so cute, but I'm just like, fuck. Those
Gary
bubbles.
Gary has to scratch outside the water bowl while he drinks. Google says it's because they don't like still water. Because like in nature, they wouldn't drink still water.
Mhm.
But it's funny. But he makes such a mess. He gets water everywhere. It's horrible.
This one is from the subreddit True Scary Stories, and it's called The First and Only Hitchhiker I Will Ever Pick Up.
Okay, why are we picking up hitchhikers at all?
So last Friday, I, 25 female, had a little time to kill before picking up my kids from school.
It's
Already terrible. You have somewhere to be. Why are you picking people up?
You're a woman and you have children and you're picking up hitchhikers?
Mhm.
I mean, granted, I get the children are in the car, but that's not the point.
It's the principal, which is the second time I've said that phrase today.
Good gravy, lady.
It was a gorgeous day, so I decided to spend some time cruising some back roads in my hometown, small and rural, listening to music. I passed this guy with his thumb out trying to catch a ride, and I almost picked this guy up. He looked to be about late 30s, early 40s, carrying a fishing pole and a backpack. Pretty innocent looking, I guess. But see, I'm a lone female and have been taught with hundreds of hitchhikers gone wrong stories that you just keep driving. So I kept driving, and as I'm driving, I'm having this internal dialogue of guilt about my decision not to pick this guy up. You know, if I was hitchhiking, I'd hope someone would pick me up. And I mean, really, what's the worst thing that could happen?
Murder,
Yeah.
rape, cannibalism, torture, being set on fire.
Yeah. The list could go on. That mixed with my new self-improvement goal of doing the things that scare me as often as possible led me to the conclusion that if I looped back around and he was still walking, I would pick him up. Sure enough, about 10 minutes later, he was still there. I was feeling a little nervous pulling over, getting him, but what was I going to do? Peel out while he was trying to get in my vehicle? Yes. As soon as he gets in, I realize I probably have made a horrible mistake. One, because he seemed like he was tweaking balls and smelled god awful. And two, because this dude was looking at me like I was a feast and he was starved. I didn't realize exactly how rattled I was with my decision until he asked for a smoke and my hands were shaking so bad I barely pulled one out of my pack without breaking it. Driving made it easier to hide my nerves, but I was internally freaking out and trying to decide how I would beat this guy's ass if he tried anything. His name was Wayne. He lives about 5 minutes from where I picked him up. Meanwhile, he's telling me how he lost his license due to DUIs and how he's living in this house with an old man. He tried to get him to come with him, but he didn't want to come, etc. He was also trying to talk to me about hanging out at his said house with him and come over and drink with him the next day. When I finally get him to his destination, it's a little shack like thing surrounded by all these junk cars and shit. He gets out and is trying to still get me to come inside with him. I tell him no and leave. I'm feeling really relieved and a little proud that I faced a fear of mine. Fast forward to Monday, my instructor says, "Holy shit, apparently someone got murdered down the road. Do you know anyone down that way?" I said, "Wow, that's really ironic. I took a hitchhiker down that road Friday. His name was Wayne, I think." probably wasn't 15 minutes later when I see old Wayne's picture on Facebook saying that the TBI has picked him up for stabbing someone to death at that house, at the very house I dropped him off at on Friday. Graphic information of how he stabbed him in the lungs, and the victim bled out in that little shack, and the old man he was living with doesn't even exist. I swear I'll never pick up another hitchhiker in my life. Ooh, she shared the article. Arrest made in Fentress County homicide by special agents with the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation into a Fentress County stabbing death has resulted in the arrest of a Jamestown man on Sunday at the request of the 8th District Attorney General. La la la.
Does it have his picture on there?
Okay. Yeah, it does. And he looks like a crackhead. I don't know why she picked him up.
I want to see.
Okay. They began investigating the circumstances surrounding the death of Mark Anthony Jennings shortly after the deputies with the Fortress County Sheriff's Office found his body at a home on Casto Knepp Road in Jamestown. During the course of the investigation, agents developed information leading to Wayne Ellis Casso as the individual responsible for the crime. I don't know, when was this? This was April 8th, 2018. He looks like a guy who would try to sell you cigarettes outside of a gas station.
He's only 5'3". That's not the point. Sorry.
Am I taller than him? I'm an inch taller than that man.
Why would you pick that guy up? He looks dirty. I mean, no offense. Like, even if you look, that guy looks like you shouldn't pick him up as a hitchhiker. The 70s taught us not to pick up hitchhikers or to hitchhike.
Yes. And it's always the people that look unsuspecting. It's always the people you least suspect.
I'm guessing everybody. Just guess everybody. Thanks for listening.
If you enjoy this episode, you can find us on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, and also Facebook at Paranoia Pair Pod, and that is all one word. And we will see you next Friday.
Stay spooky.
Bye.
I was waiting till you stopped it.
Oh.